most people in America think all of human history basically started in the 1950s. Like the way we raise our kids, where it's just normal to have to lace them with antibiotics once or twice a year. Earaches are common, being overweight, like all of these assumptions about modern life and modern farming and agriculture, they didn't exist before 70 years ago. And
Mm.
people treat them as a religion that you can't violate, that you're just like straight out heretic if you begin to question these types of assumptions. And so my wife and I decided we would just question every single assumption, so we're that homesteading, homeschooling, home birthing family that Jim Gaffigan tells jokes about in his comedy specials.
Well, what I think is really cool is the space has made so many positive strides. Just the last 3 years alone, this open questioning decision to understand, hey, raw milk versus pasteurized milk, good quality meat versus the industrial model, sending our children to public school versus potentially homeschooling, bringing back God at home versus atheism. But when you and your wife started doing this is 20 years ago, right? It's crazy to think that 2004, 2005 is about two
Yeah.
decades ago.
Yeah.
How different was the space at that time? Like, what was the perception of regenerative agriculture and homeschooling and a lot of these really important decisions you and your wife chose to make at the time?
I mean, in our part of the country, most people thought we had lost our minds. So we didn't plan to have our first daughter, Abby, at home. We were going to use a midwife in a hospital. And I guess it's around 26 weeks of pregnancy. They make you do a gestational diabetes test. And what they make your wife do is they make her fast for 12 or 14 hours or something. So she eats an early dinner the day before. She's not allowed to eat again until after this test. You take her to the hospital, and I mean, I could almost I got a copy of the ingredient label of the drink they make your wife and unborn baby drink. It's like 83 ingredients, utter crap. And then they see how her body responds in terms of its glucose, insulin, and other response to this crap drink. And then they decide if she has a risk of gestational diabetes. So I was looking at this test and I just said no. Said, I'm not having you do this to my wife and my unborn child. And the midwife and people had never had anybody tell them no before, I
Hmm.
guess. And they actually fired us. They sent us a letter saying they had fired us as clients. And that really that's what really propelled us even harder. So we're like, well, if they're not going to respect us on this, what's it going to be like during labor and delivery? You know, and so we just plunged all the way into doing a home birth, but everybody thought we were, the number of people who didn't think we were nuts was minuscule. And now, at the church we go to, probably the majority of women are doing home births who have babies. That's the sea change in 2 decades.
That's it. That's incredible. It sounds like there was a lot of faith behind your decision-making process between both you and your wife. And it's crazy to think that you literally got fired as a client for questioning the efficacy of an 83 ingredient drink that your baby is also going to be inheriting too.
Yeah. Yeah. It just, just the whole, and that's why I realized agriculture is where energy needs to go because fixing the medical system is going to be really, really hard.
Hmm.
You, you know, there's a number of areas that because of the regulatory climate, because of the power of the corporations that operate in these industries, making substantive change is going to be slow until those systems break so badly that there's no choice. But I'm like, you can make change in agriculture because, I can't change a hospital, but I can change a farm. I can't change, standards of care that insurance companies impose on doctors, but I can start a local food buying club and change the diets of 4,000 people a month.
Hmm. John, have you heard of the company called Crowd Health before?
I have.
Yeah, they're so up your alley. It's crazy. Their founder Andy's been on the podcast 3 times. He's
Mhm.
done the hat trick, and it's really just I think how insurance was initially designed to be, where it's a community. I think they have 8,000 members. We all pay to be a part of the community. They
Yep.
have a Bitcoin crowd, a carnivore crowd. You and I, we might know each other, but we might not. But we can assume that we have a similar ethos with that libertarian perspective. And I think they have a 99.8% success rate in terms of bills that are covered. And they
Yeah.
30 members go through the home birthing process in 2023 alone.
Oh, see, it's cool. And that's the crazy thing is, my goal is to re-empower people. Like it's like a hospital birth now probably costs 15, 20, 25,000 bucks, depending on where you live. And, you know, back in 2004, I think we paid $1,400 for a midwife. One of our favorite home birth memories is my son Noah, who was born Christmas Eve, 2011. It's like my wife wakes up at 4 in the morning and she's in early labor. She gave birth probably around 9 o'clock. And at 11:30, she's laying on the couch with my newborn baby. I'm making pancakes and waffles for the family. Um, and it's just like everybody's so happy. Nobody's trying to steal our baby, shove it under McMuffin lights. It's and to have that back in your family to be like, man, we can do these things. They can actually be affordable. We don't need to be chucking out huge amounts of money. We don't need to be treating everything as a disease. Um, it's just such a game changer when you expose people to a different paradigm. And as you said, the 2020 on was such a sea change in people going, man, maybe I do want to consider getting my meat directly from a farmer because the grocery cases in the grocery store are suddenly disappearing. You know, maybe I want to consider having a home birth because maybe all the things they want to do to my wife and baby aren't actually necessary. Maybe they're actually possibly harmful even.
Yeah, it's a great point, John, how all these different pieces are connected. And we have had a few females on that have either done multiple home births or they're doulas or midwives or specialists in the home birthing process. But I'm curious, what do you think men should know about the home birthing process for new fathers or people that want to be fathers? Like, I'm curious the male perspective on this whole thing.
Yeah, so I was born in 1978. So I grew up watching mainstream media, 80s and 90s. And what was that really popular show, ER, and then a lot of the family shows, they treat birth as a disease.
Hmm.
You know, they treat birth as a dangerous medical condition or possible disease that without a doctor's intervention will lead to disaster. And what birth is a slightly risky normal life event like driving your car that requires proper preparation and planning to help ensure it will go right. That birth is something your wife is designed to do. It's not a problem with your wife. Her body was made to give birth to a baby. It's a natural process that your wife needs support during, not to be stressed out during. The other thing I always tell men is even if you think home birth is best, unless your wife is on board, it's not likely to go well. Normally it's usually the wife who's very gung ho, maybe about doing home birth, and the husband's a little bit nervous about it. Um, my wife and I, thankfully, were both totally on the same page, especially after interactions with the hospital midwife and stuff. But what really makes home birth successful is both of you feeling confident in that choice and then both of you investing the time and planning to make that choice go well. We've had a few friends over the years we've let be here during home births, some female friends, obviously. And every single one of them who was here during one of my wife's births, they were utterly blown away by how different it was. Because some of them were older women who had had hospital births. Um, some were younger women who had never even been pregnant yet. And every single one of them was just like this is how birth was made to be, isn't it? You know, it's a woman surrounded by other supportive, caring people, bringing a new image bearer into the world in a loving, low stress, joyful environment and being cared for. Um, so it's super, super cool once you get over the stress factor.
No, there's so many good pieces of information you just dropped too. And I think you very astutely pointed out, it's like sometimes we just forget common logic and how God fundamentally designed women to be able to give birth to children. And all of a sudden we think about any time period before the 1950s as the dark ages. And it's
Yeah.
actually, home birthing is not super dissimilar to our perception on red meat, where it's like we've thrived on red meat for 2.5 million years. We didn't just stop the ability to metabolize it effectively in the 1950s. We've always been designed to eat it, just like we've always been designed for women to deliver children through the home birthing process.
Yeah. And when our bodies have always been designed to be able to fight off infections. You know, it's like we've normalized the unnatural and criminalized the natural, which is really baffling until you just kind of understand the arc of the last 100 years of American history.
Hmm. Well said, John.